Yeah, so I am probably the least likely activist you'll ever meet. I was not ever intending to be involved in the political realm, certainly not thinking about bathrooms every day for 2 years now. But I fell into this, and I think this fight kind of picked me. And so basically what was happening was that I was serving as a communications director for the local YMCA, Pearson-Kitsap County. So all 9 branch facilities, I was in the main office right with the CEO in my little cubicle, feeling like I had the world on fire. And I loved the Y. I was raised in the Y. My parents both worked at the Y when I was little. Like, that was home. And there was a picture of me on the wall as a child. So my boss came to me one day and asked me to draft some talking points for this new policy they were going to adopt that they perceived might be rather controversial. And for me, that's typically my sweet spot because I believed so thoroughly in the Y, and I stood behind it that I could usually find that silver lining. But what she did was she handed me the documents from our legal counsel. And when I started to review them and see what she was actually talking about, my heart just sank. And I realized that what she was saying is that we were going to adopt this new policy at the Y where we would be opening our organization's locker rooms and showers and bathrooms on the basis of gender identity. And when I was looking through the specifics of all this, what I realized was that there was just no objective criteria. It was basically, if you say that you feel like X, Y, or Z, it's a free-for-all. And so this hit me on a number of levels. It hit me as a Christian who had taken pride and been a mission director for the Y, and I felt like it was offensive to compromise truth like this. It hit me as a mom whose own kids utilize those locker rooms and whose innocence it's my job to protect. But I think what was most surprising to me was how incredibly hard it hit me as a survivor of sexual trauma. And people don't really necessarily understand what that means. But the first 10 years of my life, I was sexually abused pretty intensely. Often in a locker room, often in a shower situation, to the point where even as a college athlete who used locker rooms every day, I would still shower in my underwear. It was traumatic, and I worked really, really, really hard to relearn just what's normal and how to define my boundaries and to set unapologetic boundaries for my space and to just really value my own privacy and my dignity that way. And because of that history, I was really hypervigilant at the Y. I would regularly conduct sex offender screenings to make sure that nobody was getting access to our members, even though the Y, as you probably know, has a pretty thorough screening database. But I will tell you that every single time that I would conduct one of these screenings, I would find somebody. And it was always my job to review video surveillance footage. So I've sat there actually after people have been harmed by sex offenders at the Y and reviewed the footage and filled out the police reports. And last November alone, or before I ended up not working for the Y anymore, I caught 3 sex offenders as active members in the database. One of whom was even paying a membership dues. He just had a free shower pass. And so what instantly hit me was, this is a loophole. And at this point in the nation, I mean, it's kind of important to say, nobody was talking about bathrooms. This was not this huge thing that it's become today. North Carolina wasn't even on the radar. This was the first I had ever heard of this situation, and I went home to research it, and I couldn't find any information whatsoever. Anyway, long story short, I said, no, this is not something we can do. And I gave them a pretty thorough list of the reasons why. And for the first time in my professional career, expressed my position as a survivor of sexual trauma and what this meant to girls like me to have that space that we had really worked hard to protect and defend and declare as our own, that was already so vulnerable, be open to anybody. And the powerlessness of that too, to not be able to say or to draw my own boundaries and not to be asked how I felt about that. I felt like that was very violating, and I expressed all this, and I was ultimately told that I was being closed-minded and this is the way society was going. What I didn't know at that time, and I think this is really important to note, is that the YMCA knew that the state's Human Rights Commission was going to push this forward shortly thereafter. And so they ultimately decided not to tell their members. And they didn't tell half of our staff. And so I was sat there and I wrestled and ultimately got fired over this. They gave me 2 choices. You can either resign with severance and shut your mouth and not tell anybody what's happening or coming down the pike, because they knew that they wanted to put this new law in. Or you can just be fired on the spot. And to me, that was so re-traumatizing, because I, as a little girl being silenced with, money or whatever it was, And knowing that all of my friends and my family and these people that I was called as a communications director, my job was to make sure that nothing damaging like surprised them or took them off guard, because we kept them well informed. And I knew that the Y is imposing this policy that said that, you know, my little girl could go into the locker room and turn around and be confronted by the sight of a naked male. And that sounds hyperbolic, but that's actually what the rule looked like. And so I got fired. During that time, I wrote a blog about this in desperation in the middle of the night. I was so broken. I remember just like falling on my face and praying, and like, I don't know what to do. I'm a single mom. And it ended up being that blog went viral. It got published by the Federalist. It was the best running piece of 2016. Not because it was so well written, it's because it was so well understood. And what started to happen after that is that on a daily basis for a period of 6 months at least, I would hear from more abuse survivors, women across the country. From the left, from the right, from wherever it was, I would just hear these stories that were so heartbreaking, saying, you know, please keep fighting. And there's one that just still haunts me. It's like a one-sentence email. It was, you know, I'm 70 years old and I still sleep with the light on. And I mean, my world has been steeped in this heart for women who've been broken that way. And I know what it means to not have a voice. And I think what was so offensive is that, you know, a month later, the Washington State Human Rights Commission imposed this new rule. Now, these are not elected people. These are not people we voted for. These are not, we didn't have any say, and they did this in the dark. So they create a rule that functions as a law for all 7 million of Washington's residents without their consent or their input. This voiceless majority did not have any idea this was coming down the pike. And they said that the entire state must now adopt what the Y adopted, which is that anything goes. Any bathroom, locker room, restroom, you name it, fitting room, is open on the basis of gender identity. And what I realized was that women are probably going to lose the most in this equation. And for me, this wasn't a right-left issue. It certainly has faith components, but for me, this is primarily a women and girls issue, because if you look statistically at who gets harmed by these types of policies, it's almost every single day I get a Google alert that says there's another woman getting exploited in a bathroom or a changing room or a fitting room somewhere. Since Target imposed their foolish policy in 2016, 13 months, they have had at least 8 incidents of women getting attacked, which is more incidents than they ever had in their history combined. It's a loophole. It's a predator loophole, because it's basically like imposing a speed limit that doesn't have any numbers. You can't prove anything. So if a male wants to come in and shower next to little girls at the Y, he can do that because he says that he is either, and he doesn't have to say he's a female. He can say he's hydrogender, gender fluid, gender, anything he says goes. But the business is if they intervene, they can get sued. And if I, as a woman, object, they will kick me out. That's actually how the rule is written right now. So I find that highly offensive. It's being positioned as this like new wave of this civil rights frontier, which I find highly ironic, because I know, I've done the research now, that women fought long and hard for sex-specific bathrooms over 100 years ago. They had to write letters. When they finally got one, the men burnt it down because they didn't want the women out in public. So this to me is like definitely on the wrong side of history. And I don't know how I'm supposed to raise my little girl to believe that when she says no, her no means no. She can't even say no to who sees her in the shower. She can't even draw a boundary for herself that way. It's really got devastating implications for women. And so we filed an initiative, Initiative 1552, to repeal this. What's really fascinating to me, though, is how easy it was for this group of people we didn't vote for to force us to comply with this new rule, and how much work it takes to reverse it. It's just a long haul. We need roughly 330,000 valid signatures of Washington's residents to even vote on this come November. And if we don't get that done by July 1st, we're stuck. And that's what we get. And to me, I mean, I've never considered myself a feminist before this, but I am a mom of a little girl. And I didn't get a choice about who gets to see me in the shower when I was little. And it's really, really important for me that she can make that choice for herself and to not be called a bigot because she has this internal sense of modesty and that dignity. And I think what's happening right now, I mean, less than 2 months after imposing this new rule, less than 2 months, there was a man who walked into a women's locker room in Seattle at a pool and presented as a male, didn't bother to like wear a dress or anything like that because you don't have to now, and just started changing while teenage girls were getting ready for swim team. And when somebody asked him to leave, he says, well, no, the new law says I can be here. And the way the rule is written, nobody could prove him wrong. And the business, fearing a lawsuit, let him stay. And then he went and worked out and he came back while teenage girls were again showering in there with a man. What kind of value statement is that to women? What kind of dignity are we giving women and girls? And of course, it's offensive to anybody. It's offensive to boys and males as well. But statistically, 98% of registered sex offenders in the state of Washington are males. And 95% of the victims are females. This is my heart. This is something I'm very passionate about. So that's what we're doing.